So we've been on a journey. If you've been with us this whole morning, we started with the task remaining, looking at the unreached areas of the world, going beyond just sending Christians to help Christians become better Christians. And then we looked at the narrative of Scripture of the people God has called us to be, representing him to the nations. And now we're going to talk about how do we do that? How do I live this global Christian life? My kids are always taking my good spoons to my backyard and digging. And normally they come back with dead bugs and Coke bottles. But recently my daughter came back and she comes in the house and she's just yelling, "Dad, Dad, Dad." I'm like, "What is it, girl?" She's like, "I found an ancient Indian arrowhead." I mean, she was so excited. I held it. I was like, "Oh my goodness, that is an ancient Indian arrowhead." And she took it back and she's like, "I got to clean it." She gets the water in the sink. She gets up on the sink. She grabs the Clorox, the magic eraser, her brother's toothbrush, and she just starts cleaning this ancient Indian arrowhead. And after 30 minutes, this is all I hear. "Are you kidding me?" That's all I hear. I go, "What happened, girl?" She's like, "This isn't an ancient Indian arrowhead. This is a rock." She says, "I spent a half an hour polishing a rock." I'm like, oh my goodness, homeschool moment. I walk over to her and I say, "The world offers you a rock to polish. God gives you a purpose to pursue." The world offers you a rock to polish. Some people who are Christians, they're going to polish a portfolio, a resume, a savings for 30 years. My daughter, she polished a rock for 30 minutes. Some people are going to do it for 30 years, living their life for what the world is recruiting them to. And so what I want to focus on for the remainder of our time is, how do I live this global Christian life? How do I do it? And so I would argue every Christian needs to be a global Christian. Every Christian needs to be a global Christian. And what I mean by a global Christian is there's people who are giving, praying, welcoming the nations. They're going. We just need to be involved. We need to find our role. There's one mission, but there's many roles. There's one mission, but there's many roles. And so when you think about the global Christian life, a Christian who understands the truth and needs of God's unfulfilled global purpose. Maybe for some of you, this is the first time you've really heard the needs of the world. And you're like, "Man, I had no idea that I was responsible." Some of you, you've been on several mission trips. Some of you, this is the direction God is moving your heart. But whoever we are, we're all responsible to understand the truth and needs of God's global purpose. Now, when you think about a global Christian, you can be a goer or you can be a sender. We need both. We need the goer and we need the sender, okay? And so when I talk about the goer and the sender, here's what we're talking about. You can go here or you can go there. And then when you send, we send by praying, by giving, and by mobilizing. So we're just going to unpack the goer and the sender. Going, you go here to the nations. I mean, go to Walmart and just see the world, right? The world is here. You have a college in your town. The world is here. So we go by going here to the nations or going there. The church is offering overseas mission trips. There's a pipeline you can get in if you want to be a long-term missionary. But then if you don't feel like you're a goer, you send. And we send by praying, by giving, and by mobilizing, activating others. And so we're going to start with the sender. We're going to start with the sender, okay? Go and send. We're going to start with the sender. Here is a good definition of a sender. And I hope this, because probably most of you are senders. So I hope this is you when I read this definition. A sender is someone who is aware of what God is doing in the world. They have to be. They're senders. They're giving their money. They're mobilizing people. They know where the Muslims, the Buddhists, the Hindus, they know what countries and nations don't have the gospel. They know where the money's going. They know where the needs are. They know where the Bible-less peoples are. They know where Bible poverty is. The sender knows these things because they're the ones that are sending the money and the resources. Can you imagine a clueless sender? That would be a problem. You follow me? So a sender is aware of what God's doing in the world. They are praying for Luke 10:2, they're praying for. They are inviting others to be senders and goers. And then they're helping the workers on the field once they get there. So, hey, I know that you're in Mali. I know that you've been there for 6 years. We want to provide for you a flight to go to respite. We want to get a counselor when you're on furlough here. We're going to provide you a car. So a sender's aware of what God's doing in the world. They're praying for and they're inviting workers to participate and then helping them when they're there. So I hope this represents you. Now, watch what Paul says about the sender, okay? I used to think like, oh man, the goers, they were like, they were the real deals. But watch what Paul says. Paul is going to work backwards. He's going to show you the unreached getting reached, and then he's going to ask you, look at how that happened, okay? So, how can the unreached call on whom they have not believed? 4 rhetorical questions. They all are the same answer. They can't. You can't believe unless you call. You can't. How can they call on whom they've not believed? You can't. You have to first believe, and then you can cry out to God. Well, how can they even believe unless they hear? You can't. Before you can believe something, you have to hear it. So all of these are leading up to something. You can't. How can they hear without someone preaching? Well, you can't. You can't hear unless someone speaks the gospel to you. And now this is a really important point. They can't even preach the gospel unless the sender sends them. The sender starts the story. So for Paul, he's reversing this unreached coming to Christ, and he's looking at the steps backwards like an engineer would. And he's like, you can't even call unless they believe. You can't believe unless you hear. You can't hear unless they preach. They can't preach unless you start the story. So people are going to come to you, and you get to determine if you want to help start their story. The sender starts the story. The sender starts the story. And so how can we be good senders? Well, we send by praying, by giving, and by mobilizing. That's how we send. So I hope that when I describe praying and mobilizing and giving, it's going to summarize you guys. The one thing that the disciples asked Jesus to teach them, Lord, teach us to pray. Can you imagine? I mean, if I was a disciple and you got one bullet in your gun to ask Jesus to teach you something, I'd have been like, how did you multiply the fish? That was awesome. Show me how to catch a fish with coins in their mouth. Like, that was incredible. Lord, teach us to pray. And he does. He says this. We're going to get there. He says, when you pray this way. And he's going to help us shape our prayer. Now, I don't know if you concentric circles or what when you pray, but for me, when I pray, it normally starts off for me, like, Lord, I want to pray for myself, and then I'll go to my wife and my kids, and then I'll go back to me. But look at what Paul the Apostle says regarding what should we prioritize praying for. He says this, I urge you that you pray for kings, for people in high positions. Well, why, Paul? Why pray for dictators, prime ministers, and government officials? Because if they'll just leave Christianity alone, it will grow. Just leave it alone, and it'll grow. I mean, talk about an idea. Are you ready for this idea? What if I looked at all the unreached countries, those specifically in that area of the world we call the 1040 window, the unreached countries. There's 65 countries in the most unreached countries. And what if I researched their presidents and prime ministers? And then in my small group, every week we prayed for some of these dictators and presidents and prime ministers. And as I'm doing this with my small group, guess what I'm realizing? Not only did no one in my small group even know where these were on a map, they had no idea who the dictator was. And not only that, as they're researching Burkina Faso and the new dictator and his regime of Islam and the horrendous things that are happening there, all of a sudden they're getting a heart for the world. And as they're praying, Lord, send out workers, the tap is coming on their shoulder. You're the answer to your own prayer request. You were praying for more workers. You're the answer. And so what would it look like if just you thought, man, I'm going to start researching some of these capitals and countries and presidents. And just like Paul says to Timothy, pray for these kings. I guarantee you that phrase, I don't have a heart for the world, will not be uttered from your tongue after you do that. Now, good thing for us, we have an entire organization, and all they do is research for us. And they created an app because they're relevant. And you can download this app for free. It is free 99. Free 99, that's how free it is. And this app will pop up on your phone every day and give you an unreached people of the day. So this morning, I go to the app, unreached of the day, and lo and behold, Tanzania, unreached, Islam, 1.4 million. And then you scroll down and it gives you what's going on in that area of the world. It gives you all the prayer requests that people are praying for them. It'll tell you how many are currently praying for them. There's a live stream at the bottom. It's telling you how many people are currently on the app. So, again, Luke 10:2. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers. At 10:02 at our house, all the alarms go off. One of my kids goes to this app, and we just spend 30 seconds at a family and just pray for that people group of the day. Luke 10:2, set your alarm for 10:02. Go get the app. That's a very practical thing. So if you're having coffee with someone and your alarm goes, you're like, oh my goodness, let's stop, let's just pray. Have you heard? And you're mobilizing them. This is checking so many boxes. I know. When Jesus uses that word, send out. Ask the Lord of the harvest that he would send out. It's a very unique Greek word. It's called ekbalo, and the only time he uses it is to send out demons. So it literally is a high volume word. I mean, when Jesus cast out demons, and he would say to them, leave now, get out. That's what ekbalo means. It's not a half-heart yawn, pray the Lord of the harvest. It's an intense now, leave, go. And so that's the word he used to tell us how to pray. Ask the Lord of the world now. Church of the Gates, now. Lord, send us out now. Help us reach the reached and the unreached now. We want to be people who will pray. The person who mobilizes the church to pray will make the largest contribution to world evangelization. Set your alarm, get an app, start praying for countries and prime ministers and dictators. We have incredible resources at our fingertips. If they're not out there, make one. We need to be senders, and to be a sender, we send by praying, by giving, and by mobilizing. What is the definition of a sender? I will say it again. A sender is someone who is aware of what God's doing in the world. They're inviting others, they're praying for, and then they're helping them when they're on the field. So we send by giving. Giving. We send by giving. Think about you get a knock on the door, and you open the door, and there's a gentleman there, and he's holding a letter. And he says to you, the last living apostle is in Ephesus, and he's 88 years old. And he heard what's going on in your house 100 miles away. And he wrote this letter to say thank you for sending well. We have in our Bible one of the last letters of John. And the content is, thank you for sending well. Dear friend, you are faithful in what you are doing. Even though these missionaries are strangers to you, you don't know their kids' names or birthdays, but you are sending them out. He says they're strangers to you. You are sending them in a manner as if you were sending Jesus himself. You're listening to their stories. You're hearing their updates. You're praying for them. You're sacrificing your lifestyle as a sender. You know that the non-believers aren't going to pay. They're not going to pay to spread the gospel. So you are leveraging your savings. You know that non-believers give to good causes, but Christians give to eternal ones. And I'm writing to you to say thank you for that. I'm telling you, you are a co-worker. As a sender, hidden, you are a co-worker. Would John have written you this letter? Is your life worthy of this letter? I hope so. If not, let's get it there. Oh my goodness. How sweet would it be if you could read this letter and hear it personally from John himself? See, during the Great Depression, Christians gave 3.3%. Today, Christians give 2.3%. And so there's something about that savings and how we spend money. And if a goer is sacrificing, learning 2 languages, fighting malaria, living in a hostile environment, raising their kids in an area where there's not health care, doctors, hospitals, flying under the radar with the government, having to raise support and create a business platform to stay in the country, if that's the goer's sacrifice, should the sender be any different just because they live in Montana? I mean, you think that you just got off the hook? No. We should be matching the sacrifice. And man, what if we were so not concerned with tithing, but more concerned with sending? What if we were not concerned with the seating capacity of our church, but the sending capacity of our church? Think about how the gospel would go forth. Think about that. A sender, they're aware, they're praying, they're inviting, they're helping. I hope this summarizes you. We send by praying and by giving, but we also send by mobilizing. All right, I'm gonna blow your mind. I'm only gonna say this a few times, but I'm gonna blow your mind. This is gonna blow your mind. You're gonna be like, it's gonna blow my mind? It's gonna blow my mind. What if I stood out in front of the church, and as people came out from the church, I had a clipboard, and I just said, what is the Great Commission? How well do you think maybe this church would do? How well do you think other churches in Montana would do? How well do you think the church in America would do? Do you think people would be like crushing it? Oh, the Great Commission. Jesus gave it 5 times. We need to be disciple makers who are speaking the gospel to every nation. Or would they look at you and go, I know, love your neighbor as yourself. Close, that's the Great Commandment. I'm looking more for the Great Commission. Eat, pray, love. No, that's Hobby Lobby. You be you. No, that's no, that's not it. Do you know they did that with like 2,000 churches? What I just said. Barna did it, and 83% had no idea. 83% had no idea. Do you know it's hard to give your life to something if you don't know it exists? Your friends who are Christians have no clue God's mission. And you've sat through this morning, and now you do, and you get to go and tell them, encourage them, help them get resources that grows their understanding. A mobilizer has a passion for the world and a passion to pass it on. That's what a mobilizer is. They have a passion for the world and a passion to pass it on. I mean, people mobilize to the weirdest things. I mean, my wife, she is into this thing, and I don't even understand it, but she's watching podcasts, she's downloading things about it, she's prepping, she does it 4 minutes a day, and it's called the cold plunge. And it's where you get in a freezing cold hot tub and enjoy pain. And I mean, she'll talk about this. She has mobilized so many people to cold plunging and missions, but man, she is mobilizing them. If you come to her and you say, what are the 11 benefits of cold plunging? She will give them to you in alphabetical order, okay? I mean, she knows this stuff. We all mobilize to something, okay? A missions mobilizer, though, you could learn how to mobilize to God's heart for the world. You could learn how to activate people. You could learn how to activate people. This is what God says to Habakkuk. Habakkuk, I'm going to give you this information. It's not for you. I want you to write it down so that others will respond. Maybe God brought you here this morning, not even for you. Maybe he brought you here this morning so that you would learn these things about God's word, God's world, and God's work, and that you would go and share it with others. Maybe that you would become a mobilizer. Whatever you do for a job is not the point. But man, you are a mighty missions mobilizer. You're helping this church grow in their missions. You're helping your small group. You're helping your family. You're raising your kids to be arrows to the nations. I love this quote, every Christian, a global Christian. But every global Christian needs to know how to mobilize. Missionaries are made, not born. They're made and not born. And behind every missionary is a mobilizer. Where do missionaries come from? From mobilizers. It takes the whole church. It takes the whole church. And Christians need to be converted to missions just like the lost need Christ. When I was 16, I had a conversion from darkness to light. I got saved. When I was 21, I realized my purpose because someone explained to me God's mission to me and I'd never heard it. I got saved at 16, but man, I realized why I was born at 21. And I hope that's your story. I hope that's your story. I'll tell you a couple of fun stories. Can I tell you a couple of fun stories? You guys like this? You guys came back. Oh my gosh. Was it the yogurt? I think it was. The bananas. Some guys took 2 pieces. I'm going to just tell you, it doesn't matter your occupation. We're not talking about what you do for a living, okay? Lindsay Rice, she is in Chicago. She went to University of Illinois. In college, she got involved with Campus Crusade for Christ. She went on a summer trip to China. On that trip, there was a team of 7. She meets her husband on that trip from University of Illinois, and he was going to China. They get married. They graduate University of Illinois. They end up applying to go long-term back to China. They raise most of their support when she begins to have health problems, and she goes to the Mayo Clinic, and she realizes she has a rare disease, and she has to live within a few miles of a hospital her whole life. So China's out. She's a 3rd grade teacher. She has a few kids. She goes to Park Church in Chicago. She started a missions course that goes about 10 weeks. She has about 50 go through it every year. She's been doing it for 15 years now. Once a year, she does a refugee training for her church. She is the most significant mission mobilizer in all of Illinois, and she's a 3rd grade teacher. There is no one in the state of Illinois that has mobilized more people to the nations. She has mobilized people to 30 countries in the 1040 window. And she's a third grade teacher with kids. I was speaking in Austin, Texas. I just gave a similar message that I did at the main service. I talked about how God wanted to bless us, to bless the nations. I leave, I fly home. A year later, the church has me back. Probably what's going to happen this time, right? A year later, I come back. Surprise! And I give another message, different. I go out to the foyer, and there's a dude out there. He comes right up to me. He's got a cowboy hat on, pearl snaps. He looks disheveled. I'm going to say mid-30s. And he's like, man, can I take you to lunch? And I'm like, sure, I don't have to be at Austin Airport till 5. The staff have something they're doing. I'd love to. We go eat sushi because that's what you do. And I'm like, what made you want to take me to lunch? He's like, man, my wife is an event planner for Neiman Marcus. I'm an auctioneer. And a year ago, we were ruined by your message. I'm like, what? He's like, a year ago, we make enough money to where we live in Costa Rica half the year. We had a house right on our favorite beach that we were going to put money on. And then we heard your message about don't use your blessings for yourselves. So for a year, my wife and I have been messed up. We told the realtor in Costa Rica we don't want the house. He said, so here's what I want to do because of you. I said, what, bro? He said, I am an auctioneer, so I raise money. I want to have an event, December 6th. We're going to call it the Bless Event. I'm going to raise $500,000. I'm going to do it in 32 minutes. I'm then going to give it all to you. And you pick 5 organizations in the unreached, and you give it to those 5, $100,000 each. I'm a money raiser. I don't know missions. You're a missions guy. You don't know money. So we are a perfect match. Okay, so, he pays the sushi bill, and I don't know this guy. Do I know this guy? No. So I'm getting in his Ford F-150, fully loaded, and I say, hey, Heath, what is your last name? And he says, Heath Hale, H-A-L-E. And as I'm getting in the truck, I'm hiding my phone, but guess what I'm doing? Anybody know? I'm Googling Heath Hale. He goes, what are you doing? I say, texting my wife. And by the time I'm sitting in his passenger seat, I hit Heath Hale, auctioneer, Austin, Texas, and this comes up on my phone. And I'm like, you know McConaughey? He's like, yeah, I had cigars with him last week. I was like, oh my goodness. So Heath had an event, raised $550,000, gave it to me, I gave it away. And then he said, that was 6 years ago. And so 5 years ago, he raised $1 million, gave it to me. I gave it to 5 organizations. Last year was our third one. He raised $3.5 million in 32 minutes. Gave it to me. I gave it to 5 organizations. I mean, do these people love me? I mean, I'm calling, hello, don't screen me. It's going to cost you, And so December 6th, we'll have another one in Austin, Texas. We'll rent out a huge venue in downtown Austin. He'll invite 600 of his friends, and he'll get up, and in 32 minutes, we're hoping for $4 million. And I'm going to give it away to 5 organizations. Now, if Heath called me tomorrow and said, I'm going to the mission field, I'm going to be like, no, you're not. You are not. The most strategic thing for you is to set your fanny in Austin, and you stay there. You with me? So find your story. What has God gifted you in? What has God gifted you in? One mission, many roles. In the 1960s, John F. Kennedy stood up in front of the audience of the world and said, by the end of the decade, we're going to put a man on the moon. 3 people boarded the astronaut. 400,000 caused it to happen. My dad was a principal of a school named after one of the astronauts. No one in this room has a school named after him, but the shuttle doesn't launch without him. The sender is important. The problem is the sender is selfish. That's sort of the problem. And self-absorbed. And their number one priority before God's mission is protecting their kids. So that trumps God's mission. So I want us to be senders. How do we send? By praying, by giving, and by going. I mean, how do we send? We send by praying, by giving, and by mobilizing. But we need to be goers. There's goers, right? Hey, I praise God for the room of 400,000 technicians, but there is no mission if the 3 don't get on the spacecraft. So at the end of the day, we need the 3. Okay, that's what we need. So we need the 3. Now, there's 2 ways that you can go. You can go here to the refugees, the immigrants, the international students, those studying here, or you can go there to the reached areas of the world, areas like Europe and Latin America, or you can go to the unreached areas of the world, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. So you can go by going here or going there. And again, I drove by the stadium yesterday just to get a feel of the blackout, and 1.2 million international students. And so Missoula is always going to have an influx of the nations because of just where you live. So praise the Lord. Maybe you didn't see that as an incredible opportunity, but guess what countries are sending their students here to study? Look at what countries. Now, of these 10, how many of them are in the unreached? I'm going to take out all the unreached countries. I'm going to take out the unreached countries, and I'm only going to leave in the countries that are, I'm going to take out the reached countries. Okay, here's the countries. There we go. 8 out of 10 are from nations that don't have the gospel, and they're coming here to study. Think about that, 8 out of 10. It's almost like God has told the church, go ye, and we're like, no, Lord, we're not. We're into savings and safety and resume and free time. And so God's like, okay, I'm going to bring them to your door. They're going to be your doctors. Your kids are going to play soccer with them. They're going to live on your street. They're going to be standing in front of you in the Starbucks line. Lord, I'm still not going to talk to them. I don't care what you got up your sleeve. I know Christians who don't have an international friend from an unreached area. I know them. You're like, no, I've met them. I've met Christians who live in America. They're not going to go, and they don't have an international friend. I mean, that just seems like, no, I promise. I know them. You can ask. You don't have an international friend from an unreached country? No. How? It's hard, but I maintain it. You got to be pretty into Instagram. But I do it. I'm proud of myself. How long has it been? Well, forever. Forever. Spencer, student at K-State. I met with him. I said, Spencer, man, do you have an international student friend? He's like, no. I'm like, man, there are 1,000 international students at K-State. You don't have one? He's like, no. I was like, dude, go get you one. Go get you one, man. So he's sitting in the union, and he sees this Chinese student. You have to initiate, right? You have to initiate. He sees this Chinese student, and Spencer's heart starts pounding. He walks over, initiates. Hello. They have a fantastic 45-minute conversation. This is May 1st. After 45 minutes, Spencer's like, can I get your number? Can we hang out? Can we be friends? And the Chinese student says, well, yeah, but I'm a senior and I'm graduating May 8th. I'm going back to Beijing. Where have you been for these 4 years? Spencer's like, I'm sorry. So he's like, listen, if you need anything this week, you call me, I'm here. So he gets his number. He doesn't think he's ever going to hear from this guy again. Friday, he gets a text from this Chinese guy. Hey, can I get a ride to the airport? Spencer's like, sure. The Chinese guy says, I have a lot of luggage. Spencer's like, no problem. And so he wheels around in his SUV. He picks him up. He says he brought down the biggest hockey bag he's ever seen, and he stuffs it in the back of the SUV. And the Chinese student says, I have another. In Manhattan, Kansas, the airport's only a mile away. They strap the second hockey bag to the roof. They're driving to the airport. My friend Spencer says, man, what's in these bags? And he goes, oh, it's my gifts. And the Chinese says, it's my gifts. And Spencer goes, oh, yeah, you mean like souvenirs? And the Chinese student says, oh, no. It's the gifts I brought from China to give to my friends I made in America. I made none. I made none. That's a tragedy. We need to be people who welcome. So, senders, we send by praying, by giving, by mobilizing, and then we have goers. We go here, but guess what? The unreached is not going to be reached just by reaching the internationals and immigrants and refugees. We actually need people who are going to change zip codes. Now, if you ask people why they don't want to be involved, they always give you a number. I don't know what your number is, but everybody has a number, okay? And parents love these numbers, and they love helping their kids figure out their number. Okay, parents love helping their kids figure out their number on why they can't be a missionary. 2 and 6. 2 and 6. Man, you can't go. 9. Man, you're right. I'm 9. Thank you, Mom, for telling me I'm 9. I was going to go, but I'm a 9. If God wanted you to go, would he have made you a 9? No. Matter of fact, that justifies me not going. You're right, Mom. I wouldn't be a 9 if God wanted me to go. Wait a second. That shows you that I'm not called because I'm a 9. Oh my gosh. Thank you. I feel no guilt. I feel perfect. And every friend I ask, should I go overseas? I'm a 9. No, not if you're a 9. All of my Christians are telling me not to go. If I tell my Christian friends I'm dealing with these numbers, guess what they all say? Well, don't go. 3? Yeah, I wouldn't want to either. It's miserable. It's like begging. Who would you even ask? You don't even have friends who have money. You know, it's weird you say that because I was feeling like I shouldn't go because I don't want to do 3. Yeah. I mean, I would say if you're hesitant about 3, that's God calling you to stay. Stop it. Do you mean it? Yes. I could do this with every one of them. I'll just do one more. Just for the sake of doing it. Hang on. Six. I took a spiritual gift test and malaria was not on there. And my daughter probably wouldn't do well with malaria. And so Maybe when I'm an empty nester. Yeah, if you have kids, you shouldn't go to the mission field. You think that too? Oh, yeah. That's what we do. That's what we do. That's why Paul says, I have to make it my ambition. I'm not clicking my heels together to go to Spain, but I have to make it my ambition. Because you know what? To go to the unreached, it's a very difficult thing to do. I want to walk you through what reaching the unreached looks like. Okay? I want to act like you're 20 years old and that you're at University of Montana and you're a junior and you come to this church, okay? You're 20 years old, you go to University of Montana and you're a junior and you say to the staff here, I want to be a missionary to the unreached. And we're like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And he's like, I want to be a missionary to the unreached. Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to graduate college while you're plugging into the church. So serve, get to know us, let us get to know you. So now you're 22 years old and you just graduated college. You're a member of this church. The church knows you. You know the families. You've served here. And so now you're going to pick a mission agency. And so the staff have relationships with mission agencies that can get you to the unreached. And so they say, you should go with GSI. They go to the unreached and they'd be perfect for you. They're out of Tampa, Florida, and they're doing some of the best work among the unreached. And you're like, okay, great, I'm going to go. Well, no, because you can't go yet. You need to go get training. So you need to go to Ethnos Bible School in Waukesha like Cameron Drapes did, and you got to go there for 2 years because you don't even know how to explain the Trinity to a person that speaks your language. Imagine doing that to a Muslim in his second language. Well, I'm ready to go now. Well, I'm sorry, you can't. So he gets back, now he's 24. He's like, ta-da, I'm Bible ready. Well, we got to find the right team. So we're contacting GSI. They've got a team in Laos that we think you'd be perfect with. Okay, I'm ready to go. No, you don't have money. You got to raise support. That's going to be 8 months. All right, man, I'm 25. I'm ready to go. Okay, well, Laos isn't going to let you in. You can't get a missionary visa. So go spend a year at Clyde Coffee learning how to roast coffee and then let your platform be coffee roasting in Laos. I gotta go to Clyde's? Yes. So you go spend a year at Clyde's. You learn how to do coffee. You become an expert in coffee. You open up a coffee shop. That's your thoughts. You're like, oh, I can do this in Laos. Now you land in Laos, but you're not in your people group that's unreached yet. You're in the capital. Because your business of coffee, it has to be in the Laotian language. Your people group don't speak Laotian. They speak Fanoi or whatever it is. And so you learn Laotian for 3 years. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now I get to go into my people group that's unreached. And whatever people group you pick, but their heart language is not Laotian. So you have to learn another language. Now you're 30 and you're able to share the gospel in the unreached language. And so you realize you get your first believer and we got a problem. There's no Bible in this language. So you start translating portions of Mark, portions of Matthew, portions of Acts, portions of Ephesians, a little bit of Genesis 1 through 11, Genesis 12 through 17, Exodus 1 through 11. You start translating a little bit of Colossians, and now you get 54 small lessons, and you take them through it, and you disciple the new believers. And you hand over leadership to the new believers. And now you're 33 and you come back to Missoula. That's what it takes. Oh, by the way, you have little to no health care. Oh, by the way, you're going to have to homeschool your kids because there is no schooling. Oh, by the way, the government can't find out what you're doing. Oh, by the way, you got to raise another $150,000 for your coffee business on top of your support team. Oh, by the way, your supporters back home don't even read your newsletters because they don't even really care. Oh, by the way, no one's coming to visit you. This is why there's more taxi drivers in Vegas than missionaries in the unreached. 1792, William Carey stands up in front of his church and says, I am going to sail to India. Going to India is like being lowered down into a well, a dark well that I don't know what awaits me. But I will go if someone will hold the rope to lower me down. 1792, he said that. Andrew Fuller stood up in the congregation and said, Carey, I will hold the rope until the day I die. The first mission agency was started in Andrew Fuller's living room in 1792 in October. William Carey sails, and for the next 41 years, lives in India, translating the scripture into the language of 300 million people, all the while Fuller leveraging all of his resources to be a sender. Fuller, for 21 years until he took his last breath, were raising money, people, and helping Carey while he was there. There is no Carey without a Fuller. There is no rescuer without a rope holder. We need both. So find your role. One mission, many roles. Thank you.